think the psychedelic movement has helped me talk about other spiritual aspects of life as well, because psychedelics is like this perfect middle ground for people from spirituality and science to talk about the universe and God and our interconnectedness, because there's like a element of both. There's the element of studying and understanding nature, and then the unexplainable. So I think it's just a beautiful place for the spiritual and the scientific minds to come together and talk about what the hell we're all doing here, you know?
Yeah. Could not agree more. That was actually like that when I started talking to people a couple of years ago about what I loved so much about just mushrooms as a whole, was because for me, they're these ancient beings that form so much of the foundations of our ecosystems, of connecting natural systems together under the soil with trees, sharing basically like bioinformation, and all these theories about like human evolution and how we've evolved to be conscious. There's things like psychoactive substances and like psychedelic mushrooms that likely play a role in that. And the more we're able to understand our own neurochemistry and what it means to be conscious, the more like that for me is, I think, that kind of central question, is that like consciousness and the nature of being. That's where the science and the spiritual comes together in that great conversation around psychedelics. Like you said, is at the end of the day, it really is about like the nature of life. And for us, being the great creatures that we are, getting to ask all these questions, we get to ponder over those relationships and what that dynamic means to us. And we get to bring spirit back into science. And we hosted a podcast with Dennis McKenna the other day. And that was one of the things that I love about the psychedelic movement as well, is that like all of these researchers are talking about like creating meaning in life and what it means to have a more spiritual outlook on life. And that is the foundations of research happening right now, instead of this, let's break it down to the molecular structure. Like,
right.
Yeah, obviously that part of it's important, but how we reintegrate meaning into what we do. Because a lot of that kind of like reductionist is the word that he used. Reductionist science is what's forced a lot of the meaning out of our lives. If that makes sense. That was a long-winded to say, but yeah, totally. Like bringing those worlds together is something that I see critical as like refeeding the soul of humanity. We don't have to look at things as disconnected systems, and we've gotten really good at that.
Yeah, the interconnectedness is so inherent. Mushrooms are like their own thing that exists in our natural world, but they're interconnected with everything harmoniously. So it's such a phenomenon that this thing is interwoven into reality in so many ways, and is related to both plants and animal in so many ways.
Yeah. I like the terms that I've heard for them a lot, like the great transformers, these like guardians of life and death, because they decompose life. Fungal networks are a lot of time what decompose leaves that fall on the ground, trees as they die. Like they're the recyclers of nutrients into the ecosystem. And so they're like these gatekeepers of life and death. And I think that's such a fascinating thing, because when we think about the role that psychedelic mushrooms play in our subconscious, what they're being studied for right now, end of life therapy and end of life anxiety, like our relationship with life and death is huge. And I certainly don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah, it's that's true when you really think about it, like how spores will find anything decomposing like anywhere. It'll find it in the fridge, it'll find it if you toss something in the backyard, like, and
in space.
And in space.
Find spores in space. They're like one of the few things that can survive.
And that was the connecting experience, or the inherent experience, every time I did a large enough dose of mushrooms, psilocybin. But I was able to confront my death. Every significant experience made me go through a certain door of accepting death. And it's interesting that the mushroom itself, the parallels between life and death, and all the surrounding benefits of mushrooms. It's just so amazing that one species or a network of species, one thing in our reality can do so much, can serve such a large purpose.